You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. All right, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call, and today I'm joined by Brad Hunt, and we are back to our book reading of Crow Killer, the Saga of Liver-Eating Johnson. I think we're getting towards the end. We got a couple, maybe one more reading or two. We're not sure, but we're getting close to the end of the story here. So we left off last week with discovering that Mad Mo, Mad Mo, was actually Morgan.
Crazy woman's husband.
Crazy woman's husband. John Morgan,
John
I think
Morgan.
his name? John Morgan, the arrogant, egotistical guy who left the wagon train with his daughter and two sons and camped at the river for 2 weeks or more, or a month or whatever, while they're fixing
Indian
the wheels.
territory. Shouldn't have been.
He got scalped.
Gets scalped, gets away.
And they rode off with him after they murdered his children and scalped them. And they left Crazy Woman alone because she was crazy. And those were the Crow, weren't they? That attacked her. I think it was the Crow. I think so, or the Blackfeet. I can't remember. But then what happens is he disappears. Well, we find out in last episode, that in fact, Mad Mo, this whole time, the mountain man Mad Mo, who just basically was killing as many Indians as he could, was actually Mad John Morgan, Crazy Woman's husband. Also, to catch you up, if you haven't been listening, we encourage you to go back and catch up on all the other books. But basically, Jeremiah Johnson. Jeremiah is his middle name, by the way. His name is John Jeremiah Garrison.
Garrison, correct. And I did not know that until I was researching things.
My mother is way big into genealogy, so she started, she's been listening to the series. She's gone back into his family tree and went all the way back, and I should have her on this show. Yeah. But she said that basically he's of Scottish descent, and so he's just a big, white, red-haired, Scottish, kilted, crazy.
Are we talking about me
Viking
here? What?
Dude.
No, I'm just kidding. He's a much bigger dude, I'm sure, than I am.
But you know what I mean? Like he comes from that wild background. So there you have it. He's of Scottish. And the other thing that I read recently, and I think I mentioned this on the last show, a lot of the native folks at the time, according to historical records, the Europeans were quite a bit bigger than the Indians of North America. And that's not untrue of other cultures as well, like in Vietnam, in Japan. Like the average European male is a lot bigger than other groups of people. People in South America are generally smaller than Europeans. So you have that sort of Viking, Neanderthal type bloodline. And then you have your other folks, but there's a certain barbarianism in John Johnson. He definitely inherited the genes for surviving in the cold, being tough as hell, and
he's got the instincts, the nose.
Yeah,
he's built to survive in the mountains.
So anyway, catching up with the story, Crazy Woman died after 2 decades. The Crow showed her respect. So that softened Jeremiah Johnson's heart to the point where he decided he was going to go. And
so he killed the 20th warrior that was tracking him for 14 years or something like that, 12, 14 years. And after Crazy Woman died, he wants to make peace, I guess you want to say. And you're getting into the point where there's other wars going on between the Indians, the Europeans. He
meets up with Graybeard from the Gray Bear from the Crow. Anyway, he makes a peace offering. Basically, he becomes friend of the Crow at that point. And he's kind of accepted by them. So, a lot has happened. He went to the Civil War. He served in the Civil War for a short time. He kind of got soured on serving in the Civil War toward the end because after scalping all of the enemy, he scalped basically any enemy he came across, whether they fought for the North or the South. Didn't matter. That got him into trouble. That's about all we know about what he did in the war because he didn't really talk about it. No one recorded it. Other than Army records, So, Other than that, he is back, and he goes on this campaign against the Nez Perce with all these mountain men, and they get ambushed, and Big Anton Sepulveda, and
the Utes are with them, and the Utes
betray him,
turn on them.
Then they capture the Utes that betrayed him and torture him and kill him.
And they put what was it? They call it the wolf. They call him the wolf or whatever.
No, that was a different.
Oh, that's right.
That was the group that kidnapped.
That's right.
That's a different.
Yes, that's a different. There's so much going on in the story.
There is the story where he chops off.
Yeah, they take all the scalps.
The leg after the Blackfeet capture him, and he's indignant about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And he escapes and goes 200 miles with the Indian leg over his shoulder and eats it the whole way home. And so this is kind of this is a different story.
Yes, correct.
Where we left off.
That was my fault.
They're kind of running together, but you get it. He's lived quite a life now. We're going to get back to the book here, and this is a story that you mentioned actually as a practical joke. Mm-hmm. You said that you read in Wikipedia, but we'll read it here from this point in the book. Before we do, I want to remind you, if you like the show and what we're doing, leave us a comment, like, and subscribe to the channel on our YouTube channel, or same on Instagram or on iTunes and Spotify. You can find our podcast most places, I think. Brad's kind of in charge of that. Brad, make sure it's everywhere. But also support us by getting the new maps at Go Hunt. If you haven't got those, if you use the code GRITTY over there, it's a $50 map, digital map, but it's only going to cost you $30 in essence because you get a $20 store credit for the Go Hunt gear shop.
And that's for all 50 states.
You get all 50 states, and they have a new feature with the maps where you can download. It's 10 times larger.
Basically 10x of your other maps when you're downloading offline maps. So you can basically do like almost a quarter of a state or just a big area, a whole unit at a time, multiple units at a time.
It is so useful.
It's so nice
to be able to go in there and say, I just want the whole northeastern part of the state, all of it. And I want all the layers and all high res. And you can do that, and it downloads real quick, and you're done. And you don't have to worry about little sections that you might have missed.
Correct.
In addition to that, you get all these layers, and you get the maps, or you get this all 50 states, and you can download 10x larger. But in addition to that, the digital satellite imagery is among the best out there available. We talked about this on an earlier podcast. I had some people that were friends that follow along, and they're like, I don't know, man. I compared my old map system to this new map system. I think it might be better. It's not better. I've compared them now pretty thoroughly. Whatever might have happened a month ago or so.
Yeah, with the changes they've made, like there is no question. The 3D is...
The 3D and the digital, the satellite imagery.
Yeah.
The satellite imagery is just good.
Yeah.
Now, I've had a bunch of friends say the desktop version of the Go Hunt maps is for scouting and preparing before you leave the house. That is only second to Google Earth.
Yeah.
And I will say that on Google Earth, you can't plot waypoints. You can't plot you can't go in there and drop your pins. You can't access it when you're offline. And so to be able to use the terrain analysis tool from the Go Hunt maps and to be able to go in there and plot things on your desktop version that then syncs to your mobile version, it's an excellent tool. It's just an excellent map system. And so for, in essence, $30 when you use the code GRITTY, you can't go wrong. So check that out. And then as always, check out Stealthy Nutrition, Peaks Equipment, and Mountain Ops. Those are big partners of ours that every time you shop there and use our code GRITTY, you save. You can also use the code GRITTY at Seek Outside, Sheep Feed Orthotics, and the e-scouting courses by Mark Livesey, which are well worth every penny.
Every penny.
If you haven't got them, you need to. They're probably the best online course for getting you ready to have a successful hunt, period, across the board.
And it's
catered for elk.
Yeah, it's catered more towards elk, but it's going to help you across the board.
Yeah, once you take, it's like 30 40 hours of instruction.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong. So back to the book, Brad. Let's get into this. Thank you for indulging our little promos.
Yeah.
We appreciate you guys for supporting us. Okay, so here we are in the book. It says, Biscuits for Blackfeet. Fort McPherson, Nebraska, in the summer of 1871 was the generally announced meeting place for the mountain men and any plainsmen, Indians, soldiers, and wolfers who might want to join in with the mountain men's plans. Liver-Eating Johnson went to McPherson on the Big Black that had been Big Antone's to get up a small party for a trapping trip into the Bighorn Mountains. So, to the general amusement, did Buffalo Bill Cody attend the McPherson gathering. Young, wide-eyed Jack Anderson, meeting both men for the first time, aimed to join in with just such a man as Johnson, and has reported what supreme contempt Johnson had for Cody. Interesting. Buffalo Bill Cody. So Johnson didn't like him. Buffalo Bill accomplished his purpose at McPherson, even though, as Doc Carver, the originator of his show, has stated, no Western man ever took him seriously. He was considered by every Westerner to be the poorest shot on the plains. He never killed an Indian in his life. The very model of buckskin fashion, Cody recruited the actors he needed for a play, of which he was to be the hero in Eastern theaters. You can see how he's just sort of... I know a few hunting dudes like that. I'm not going to name names. But there's quite a few that I know that have the image online as though they are... among the most capable and elite of backcountry type hunters and Western hunters.
Yeah.
And are, in fact, smoke and mirrors. Like my mom said yesterday when I was in the house having some dinner, she said, charlatan. He's a charlatan. She was talking about someone in the industry that has the perception of being capable, but isn't. And what happens inevitably is when people know guys that know are in the know and do the hunts and have been there, you know who's a fraud and who isn't, who looks good. And it's harder today to pull that off than it was 10 years ago or even earlier. In fact, many of the charlatans are, in my opinion, are holdovers from an earlier time. Because so much, it's hard with the modern world, and as you share content, the more curated the person is, the more likely they're fake.
Right.
The more you only see the perfect photographs and the short video clips and nothing else.
Yeah.
Often the reason for that is because if they were to show you top to bottom how it went from start to finish on a hunt, you'd see that they don't really know what they're doing or they're a fake.
Right.
So here they are with Buffalo Bill and John Johnson, who is probably the most legit, real mountain man you can think of at this time, most respected among the other mountain men, the most revered, after all, doing like very harrowing. He fought 20 Crow. He's like the real thing.
Yeah, right.
Then he sits here with Buffalo Bill, who people think is that guy, but it really is not that guy at all.
That guy.
He's fake. It's funny how there's this serious contempt he has. So as he's the hero of that, but again, look, Buffalo Bill did what.
He was the original content creator. Come on.
So he says that Johnson too succeeded in his more modest recruiting. Pete Coyle had already promised Delgue that he would make a third, and he recommended White Eye to complete the party. Johnson looked the young fellow over and shook his hand. It was agreed that they should first go to Fort Pierre on the Missouri, where Pete had left his equipment, and thence strike due west to the mountains. After buying such supplies as they needed from the sutlers, the four partners mounted their horses one hot morning in July and set out for Dakota. Delgue, whether in joke or in innocent admiration, suggested, even as they headed up the Platte, Liver-Eating, why ain't ya ask Buffalo Bill along? And then he might get his britches dirty in them bighorns, he said.
See, I didn't realize, I don't know if it's stated in there, but his real name is William Frederick Cody.
Mm-hmm. Buffalo Bill Cody.
Yeah, Buffalo Bill Cody. Yep.
Wide-Eye could always tell a good story, as is proved by his reminiscence on which so much in these pages has been based. So Wide-Eye was one of the people that's referenced a lot, and Del Gue is referenced a lot, as they told their story in their 80s or something of all these things that happened, and some people caught it before these people passed on. Makes you wonder what other legends and stories never got told of other people that we just lost in the halls of time.
Oh, absolutely. You know? Like even you think about it in your family, like I would recommend everybody do this because I didn't, and I regret it every day having the capabilities, to record and stuff. But like before my grandpa passed away, I wish I would have sat down with him and got his Navy stories and his hunting stories and just recorded them all.
Absolutely. I did that with my grandpa before he passed away. He shared some stories. I have a podcast I recorded. I think it's like, I don't remember which episode number it is, but I'll go back and listen to it here and there because he passed away last year. Yep. And they're just priceless. And then my mother's kind of a historian buff and a genealogist, and so she has recorded all of his stories in a book. And so we have a huge, thick volume of just tons of stories of him growing up. And what's crazy is they did rope bears and
that was no joke.
Like they did like cowboy stuff way back when. And they lived on horses. And then when he got an airplane, like in the 50s, the man was they were just flying planes wherever and landing them all over. Like it was the Wild West. They could just do whatever you wanted in an airplane. There weren't a lot of rules, and they did some crazy stuff in airplanes. And back then also there wasn't the most, you didn't follow the game laws. There was just ample harvest of whatever.
Well, yeah, and I would say 90% of them, they were always usually meat hunting.
Well, totally.
So
absolutely,
you got 5 tags. Okay, no matter who it is, we're putting 5 elk on the ground. Might be one guy shoots all 5.
He was feeding the entire church segregation.
Yeah. Yep.
Over. So here we go. Wide-Eye, his tales must have been a welcome addition to the campfire lore on the trek to Wyoming. He must surely have rehearsed more than once the tale of his own Wide-Eye, or rather Snow White Eyebrow. His escape with Yankee Judd from a Sioux war party, the gale at their backs, the prairie set afire, his and Judd's exhausted horses, their dismounting at a buffalo wallow, and their self-immersion in a foot of water, their long wait in the wallow till the party passed over the burned-out prairie in pursuit of their riderless horses, the burning buffalo chip that struck Jack in the eye and on the eyebrow, his and Judd's weary fight to the camp of the famed friendly chief Whistler. That sounds like a story in and of itself.
Right, exactly.
Johnson and his partners met no enemy now. So, dude, you're going to need to look up Wide-Eye because it sounds like some damage happened to him and bleached his eyebrow white or something. And it stayed that way forever as they were hiding in a buffalo wallow. Did they have a straw, a reed, and they just laid on their backs and were breathing through a straw as the Indians rode over past them?
It's funny because he permanently,
while the prairie's on fire,
dyed his eye or something. But there was one time I accidentally shaved my own eyebrow off. I was trimming them and took it off. So my wife, we had to go to church or whatever, and my wife took fake eyebrow stuff and put it on. This is a deep dark secret, people.
You wore makeup?
She did. She put it on there, and I was like, I have to. It was bad. And then, obviously most time during the day it was gone. But
I burned mine clean off. My parents told me we lived in the Oregon brush and some backcountry area on 40 acres. And it was the blackberry bushes. We had like a mile-long gravel road up into where we lived. And the blackberries would just encroach on the road just like everything in the Oregon coast. And and then the cars would get scratched.
Right.
And so we were paid as kids to go and chop it down with machetes and sticks and stuff. Well, they told me I had to do that. That's when I hit my cousin Ben in the head with a machete as well. Like he has this split right down this eyebrow as I went backhand this way as he was walking. I had the right-hand side of the road, and he had the left, and he comes walking over. I didn't see him.
Wham!
So he had stitches right across his forehead.
So
I'm glad it didn't especially with my swinging arm. I got some gusto.
He was a beanpole back then, people. Come on.
But
no.
My parents told me to get this driveway done, and I had the bright idea after they left was to cover it all in gasoline and light it on fire and burn it down. So I covered this. I just dumped this whole can on there, and I'm standing just a few feet away, not realizing how flammable this was. And I throw this match, and it I mean, there was like fumes in the air, and the explosion just sent me reeling back, and it completely burned all my eyelashes, my eyebrows, and the front of my hair completely burned off. My face was burned.
Hold on, you had hair back then.
My skin was burned like I think 15. Skin was burned, and I got blisters and stuff, but the eyebrows and all the hair was gone. For quite a while. And it's burnt
got
hair.
Some fire stories, but that's for another day.
Yeah. But anyway, look them up, Brad. Yep. I want to hear a little more about White-Eye. So it says, Johnson and his partners met no enemy, though their route ran directly through the Black Hills of the Sioux. Delgue assuring White-Eye that wherever liver eating goes, there's bound to be some trouble. He argued the theory that if no Sioux fell upon them, Johnson was merely saving the party for a fight with the Blackfeet. Pete Coyle, as to dispute Dell's theory, reminisced that once, way back, he had known John Johnson to go a whole season without any Indians showing up. Johnson finally appealed to, as he sat smoking by the fire, would announce only, if and there's any tenderfoots here that's afraid of Indians, they just better stay out of the Bighorn Mountains. Any mistrust which White-Eye may have felt was surely aroused when he first saw Johnson's cabin. The cabin was set directly over a spring some 50 feet above the bottom of a canyon, but the canyon was blind.
So it says White-Eye is Joseph Foster Moore Anderson. White-Eye. That's what they called him. I'm going to figure out why they called him White-Eye.
It says, and White-Eye, though his short apprenticeship had already taken him into a great deal of action, nevertheless had a preference for open plains where he could not be boxed in. There's only one way out of this pocket, he told Dell and Pete, but neither would give him satisfactory answer. He's like, this is like a trap, he says, Dell said with a far from reassuring pat on his shoulder. Supposing there's Indians, he's already spotted us, he asked. Then we'll have to climb this mountain, he said, and pointed vaguely toward sheer cliff sides rearing 1,500 feet straight up. So basically, where he has his cabin is just like up against the cliff, and there's no way out.
So here's the story of how he became White-Eye.
Okay.
So it says they're surrounded. So he's with Yankee Judd, as they say, and they're investigating some streams for beaver and otter. They became surrounded by Indians who, upon not only being able to overtake them, set fire to the tall dead grass. The wind at their backs, they ran into a big buffalo wallow full of water, about a half acre of it, about a foot deep. They turned their horses loose, never to see them again, and Joseph lay flat down on the water in a soldier's overcoat over his head. When he thought the fire had passed, he uncovered his face and raised up to take a look. The air was full of burning buffalo chips, and one that was just a live coal of fire struck him in the face over his left eye, creating an extremely painful injury. They went to camp where they knew friendly Indians. Old Peter, a sub-chief, there had his old medicine man tend to him and used a thick plaster made out of buffalo manure, roots, blue, meshy clay. The new hair that grew in over his eyebrow was
burning
white and
buffalo dung.
Yeah,
hit him
pretty
in the
much.
eye.
Exactly. And it said that his hair grew in white and very noticeable. So that's one hell of a story.
So it's scarred, basically.
Yeah.
And the scar produced white hair, which is not, I've heard of.
It's not uncommon. Yeah, not at all.
Damage, definitely. So basically the Indians are like, we're going to burn them out.
Yep.
And just lit the whole prairie on fire. And as they ran for their lives to not get burned alive, they jumped in the wallow. A few years ago, I went to Alberta. And we got there, and Alberta had just had a major prairie fire, and the fire had just gone from one part to the other in a minute or two, a couple minutes. And the speed at which a prairie fire can go from one spot to another is...
Oh, it's unbelievably fast.
If you haven't seen it, you just can't, you don't know.
Like
you don't
take those
understand
dry grasses and a little bit of wind, and within less than a minute, it can cover like quarter mile or more.
It's like a flash explosion almost.
Yes.
And so all these deer were standing out there. I don't remember if there was pronghorn as well, but there were deer out there that were, when we arrived, which was just a day or two after the fire, there's all these deer standing there out in the fields. They looked kind of normal, mostly. A little bit burned, but they were all blind, every one of them. And so they were just standing there looking off into space, starving to death. They couldn't see with their eyes because the fire had come through so fast and so hot that it didn't kill them or burn them. It just burned past them. But the fire it blinded them, and it burned them somewhat. And so you had all these animals, because they're probably running to and from within the fire, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you had all these deer that it just wiped them out.
We've had cattle like fires on the desert, catch up, and cattle, they have no place to go in the lava rocks and stuff, and just burn alive, or some of them are still alive.
They're still alive. Like we saw a lot of still alive, half burned.
Yeah.
Deer.
Yep.
It was. I wouldn't have pictured that if I hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And to see it, it was just like, wow, it was devastating to see. And the grass and stuff just looked like it was going to regrow pretty quickly.
Yeah, because it burns so fast, like it's
it
hot.
Didn't burn to like
it's
the
a
root.
Super hot fire, but it's
Just
moving so
top.
fast that it just across the dirt, and that's it. Like there's not really any prolonged burning.
They were saying
like
when it gets that dry and you're in that kind of country, because it'll just hit the road and stop.
Yeah, right.
And the problem is they were like, we couldn't even so much as drive a vehicle down a grassy spot because just the heat from the tailpipe could start it on fire. But all you need is one lightning strike, and it just, you have a fire that just explodes. It's so ready to go up in flames.
Yep.
So I'm not surprised when they light it up
that
he's like running for his life, and they found it was 1 foot deep, 1 acre
and they said
big.
it's like around a 1 acre or whatever.
That's wild.
Yeah, and they just laid in it.
And then threw their duster over their faces.
And then a buffalo chip right in the face.
He sat up too soon. Should have stayed
Should have
low.
stayed low.
That's so crazy, dude. Imagine the sound of that fire just ripping.
Oh, and just the heat.
I mean, they'd have died. They'd have died if they hadn't found the wallow.
Right.
I mean, I think, or I don't know. I mean, that heat has to be crazy.
Yeah, or maybe not necessarily died, but back then they eventually would have died because they didn't have the modern medicine.
I mean, it was hot enough that a floating piece of buffalo dung burned his face and scarred him.
Oh, and if manure will burn hot for a long time.
I didn't know that.
Manure will stay burning for a long time. I mean, even just piles of manure.
Well, I know that the pioneers would collect buffalo chips, and that's how they would. That's how they would stay warm in the prairies. Burn that.
Yep.
Crazy. Okay, back to the book. It says that he's making jokes about they're making jokes because White-Eye sounds uncomfortable with the location of the cabin. Pressed further by White-Eye, Pete would suggest only the general explanation that if the cabin had no escape, Johnson must have planned that it would have none, and that he baited the Indians in any way he could. White-Eye urged that at least the three partners could ask Johnson why they were situated so, but Pete and Dell solemnly assured him they must not ask him. In the month they had before the snows came, the four partners had ample time to work out their respective chores. It was settled that each, in his turn, would stay by the cabin to watch the saddle horses and their pack animals, 3 big Missouri mules. As boss of the outfit, Johnson delegated the skinning chore to the others, smoking his pipe while their work went on. Trapper, were you going to argue with John?
No,
dude.
Exactly. What are you going to do?
Why are you just smoking a pipe? The trappers learned soon that they were in a real fur pocket amidst plentiful mink and beaver. The skinning sessions in the cabin at night would surely have deemed tedious indeed without the exchange of stories. Those night sessions were a revelation to White-Eye. Given that rarity and eager new evidence, Dell and Pete expounded the lore of the mountains hours on end. Even the crow killer, sitting in his dark corner back of the fireplace, smoking his pipe and stroking his great beard, broke in from time to time to set the record straight. These men spoke of hair-raising adventures and dreadful deaths, as if they were commonplace. They filled in to the last detail the stories of bloody engagements, which were legend to the plainsmen, but in which they themselves had taken part. One cloudy night, as the others sat skinning out the pelts, Johnson suddenly rose and went outside, as always with his rifle. When he returned an hour later, covered with heavy flakes of the first snowfall, he stood his heavy rifle in the corner and sat down again in his usual corner. "Horses and mules are gone," he said after a time, and filled and lighted his pipe. "Well now, I told you, Pete," said Delgue, slamming a half-skinned out pelt to the floor and getting to his feet. "I told you, wherever liver-eating goes, there's Indians." Johnson chuckled and puffed out smoke. "All right, you told us," White-Eye said. Or so at least he made himself out as saying in his later tales. "But what'll we do now? We're shut in with no way out. We've lost horses, pelts, everything." Delgue, instead of answering, opened the door. The blast of wind that entered sent snow all over the room. "Well," he said, "there'll be 3 feet of snow out there in the morning." Johnson knocked out his pipe on the stone fireplace and got to his feet. Like a Viking giant he stood, with the fire playing on his red beard. White-Eye wasn't sure whether the parting was grin or snarl. He looked now at the young trapper directly, but spoke to Dell. "Dell," he said, "I lost more than all of you, didn't I?" "Yes," Dell said. "You lost their best horse in all the West." And such indeed was the reputation of the big black with the white star that had been Big Anton's. "Don't you fret, youngin'," Johnson said. "We'll get out here and we won't be followed." Even Delgue looked at Johnson in surprise. Surely they could not leave the canyon as they had come in, for any foe would be on constant lookout from now on. "Blackfoots?" he asked. Johnson nodded. "Biggest biscuit eaters in the world," he said. And unbelievably, he built up a roaring fire to fool them Blackfoots, he said, and stood in front of it. Pete Coyle spoke up. "It must be midnight, liver-eatin'. We'd better be skedaddling." "One more chore before we go," said Johnson. "One more chore for Crazy Woman." Remember, the Blackfeets are the one who killed Crazy Woman. Mm-hmm. The Crow respected her and kind of protected her and stayed away from her because she was touched. Yeah. But the Blackfeets kind of mocked that whole thing and killed her. And so he has a vendetta against the Blackfeet for not only what the wolf had done and for insulting him when they captured him as prisoner,
but the disrespect for her.
And the general rabble-rousing of the Blackfeet in general. They're sort of the Indians that they're always out causing trouble, and he's always out in a battle with them, it seems. So he says there's one more chore to do. White-Eye was never to be quite sure whether Johnson had wanted the Blackfeet to break in on the winter's trapping, or whether his elaborate plans had been made only for the possibility. He took 2 bread pans from the wall and dumped a large measure of flour in each. Next, he took a large can from the rude shelf, dumped perhaps half its contents into the floor, and mixed thoroughly before calling to Dell for water. "What you doing?" White-Eye asked Dell as Johnson began to mix the dough. "Making biscuits," he replied, and then added, as if only in slow realization that White-Eye's question might not be so stupid as it sounded. "Liver-eatin' makes the best biscuits in the mountains. Guess he thinks them Blackfoots is going to be hungry." The young trapper summoned up his own deadpan humor. "I've made biscuits some, and I'd say he puts in too much baking powder." Johnson turned and directed at White-Eye, a gaze that caused so many men to shrink. "This ain't baking powder," he said. Now, at last, Pete Coyle guffawed, slapping White-Eye on the back. "That's Wolfer's strychnine, young'un. Baking powder biscuits are for whites. These kind are special made for the nice Blackfoot Indians." Soon Johnson had his biscuits formed and placed in the bear grease-smeared pans. "There's going to be some spoiled livers round here," said Delgue. The pans smoked and the biscuits browned. Shortly after midnight, Johnson unbarred the heavy rear door, which, so far as White-Eye till then knew simply led to some cache of supplies up against the cliff. "Built this cabin for some such time as this," Johnson said, stepped outside, and was gone for a whole half hour. When he returned, he said, "She's cleared up, and the stars are a-shining. We might as well shake out through the tunnel." He placed a slow-burning hardwood log on the fire. He set the 2 pans of brown, delectable biscuits in front where they would hold their warmth. Not even Dell could wait. "You really dug a tunnel through here, Liver-Eating?" he demanded. "Not dug, it's natural. Right out of this canyon," Johnson said. Wide-Eye still looked doubtful of what he might be in for, and Johnson condescended to elaborate. "The tunnel would take them to 10 feet above the floor of another canyon. Just a little drop," he said in high good humor, as if that were his young partner's concern. That was his only concern. "Never seen Liver-Eating so cheerful," said Dell to Wide-Eye. The trappers' further preparations must be simple. They knew they were in for no picnic. Even after escaping the Blackfeet, they must walk the long 250 miles to Lair. Torture for men accustomed to riding horseback. They could at least be sure that after they left the other end of the tunnel, the falling snow would cover their tracks before any pursuers might break through the back door. But once the snow stopped, they must travel by night and hide, with constant lookouts during the day. They inspected their weapons and inserted fresh loads. They honed their knives and hatchets. Johnson surveyed the room thoughtfully. Observing now what some shrewd foe might see as suspicious, he dumped the remainder of the strychnine into the kettle of flour and threw the empty can out the door. He looked last and lovingly at the biscuits, set so natural by the fire. "They'll think we's scared off just as we was about to eat," he said. Chuckling, he motioned for the others to follow him into the tunnel. There he closed and barred the door once again from the outside. Now, according to Wikipedia, he fed 20 Blackfeet Indians strychnine as a practical joke.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I scoffed at that, because the idea there is to paint white people as the bad guy and the native people as victims.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, there's no doubt that the native people were here first, and the Europeans moving further and further west took over their lands and dominated and basically supplanted the people who were here first.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah, right.
The idea, though, that one group was more cruel than another by group is, to me, always bothers me, because, as I've said before, people are individuals.
Yeah.
They're unique individual human beings. You have people who are wicked evil, that are within the Indian community, and then you have in the white community the same thing. You have evil comes with human beings, not by race, not by culture, evil comes on an individual level. In this case, though, you have people moving out west and feeling entitled to whatever lands they want to move into, and the native people feeling entitled to defend them. But that's also no different than the native people who were there before the Blackfeet came in.
Yeah.
And the native people who were there before that. And that, like, as old as time, human beings and groups have been dominating and encroaching on and warring with each other.
Yeah.
It just so happened that the Europeans were so technologically advanced and more unified in general. If the native people weren't all so fragmented in little pockets of tribes, and instead were one body of people, they would have just repelled the white man.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But they just didn't have that. And I think that the white man in general killed them more by disease than anything else.
Yeah.
You look at COVID, right? Like that's far more deadly is a disease that you have no immunity to. A pandemic is far more devastating to a population than, say, war.
Yeah.
You can't fight a virus or a disease or smallpox.
Yeah, especially.
And it kills 80%.
Especially 100 whatever years ago.
Yeah, and
so years ago.
But anyway, here he is. He's got a tunnel into the mountain.
Yeah.
That takes him into a cistern canyon.
That's what it sounds like.
Where when they pop out that tunnel, they'll be 10 feet off the ground. So they gotta shimmy down. But I suppose he said that it was always there, or he found it, or whatever. That's pretty interesting. So he didn't just go in and put a cabin there that had no escape. It has an escape. It's almost as if he's been daring them to do this for a long time. Which is kind of White Eye and Pete's comments is that. And so he's in the cabin, and he's just used strychnine, which they use to kill wolves, and it's flavorless. You can't smell it. It's odorless, flavorless.
Yeah.
And he has now spiked all those muffins with strychnine so that when
they scarf down the biscuits.
And it sounds like what happened is they took their mules and they took their horses, and he knows they're out there, and he knows that they're planning some kind of attack at some point. Yeah. And the snow is now coming, and they're kind of trapped. And there's really, with that kind of snow, there's no way to hide your tracks when you leave. I mean, there's no way. If you try to leave, they got you.
Yep.
And they need to leave because they got to go trap. It's winter. So they know that they're just sitting ducks. So he makes the biscuits and leaves the trap there for them. Now, does that sound like a practical joke to you?
No.
I mean, it's kill or be killed.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, don't mess with me and I won't kill you, right?
And I mean, in a way, it slightly has the jokingly manner of how he does it, and because basically
in war, you ever hung out with a Navy SEAL or an ex-military person?
Yeah.
They have some dark humor. I think you have to, when I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and they talk about the prisoners in concentration camp, all their humor is macabre. Mm-hmm. It's all dark and they just kind of have to laugh or cry. Right. Humor is a universal human trait in times of, you watch a movie where it's like they're doomed. And what starts happening, everybody starts making jokes.
Yeah, right.
It's like there's or the other alternative, which is to just, it's like this happily accepting your fate come what may and just enjoying the last moments. Yeah. That's kind of what happens in these, to me.
And I think, with the jokes that get presented in those situations is because, I mean, yes, it's a serious situation, but at the same time, you've got to lighten it a little bit to still keep the camaraderie, especially in a fight scenario. I think
they're also pissed off. They've worked for months and months and months on in the cabin, getting their trap, and now all their pelts were stolen. Their mules were taken, the 3 big mules and their horses, and they're like, "You're gonna take all my labor and my livelihood right now."
Well, and back then, especially,
after I've already tried to make peace,
a horse to somebody is very valuable to them.
And so I think it's kind of like, I dare you.
Yeah.
And if you do this, I'll make you pay. He's built a legend already in and of himself. And if you have the gall to come after me, I'll make you. This isn't like today. Although we could devolve into this rather quickly. I have no illusions about that. So he says he didn't really dig this tunnel out. It was natural. But he may have made it bigger or something like that. We don't really know. But this is how, as the legend goes, okay? It says, the trappers' further preparation must be simple. They knew they were in for no picnic. Oh, yeah. The snow, once the snow stopped, they must travel by night and hide with the constant lookouts during the day. So basically, they're still on a run for their lives. Mm-hmm. Even if these Indians fall for this trap, if a bunch of them die, whatever, they know they have an arduous, 200 miles?
250.
250 miles to Fort Laramie.
Yeah.
For refuge
in the winter.
So this isn't a practical joke, as Wikipedia says. Right. They inspected their weapons and inserted fresh loads. They honed their knives and hatchets. Johnson surveyed the room thoughtfully, observing now what some shrewd foe might see as suspicious. I read that. So he looked at the last loving biscuits, set so natural by the fire, chuckling. He's like, they're going to think they scared us off just when we were about to eat him. He closed and barred the door once again from the outside. So again, this is what bothers me about kids today in school.
Mm-hmm.
They're told the story on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Johnson was this, and he did this bad thing, and he just did it as a practical joke, and these poor Native people, it's unfair, we stole their lands. And it's such a biased and erroneous picture of reality. Don't soften the truth for me. Just tell it like it was. I can take it both ways. I just want to know reality, and reality sets us up for the greatest path forward. It's just nonsense the way that, because my kids are in school, and the things that they were taught about Columbus and other colonial.
It's all really sugar coated.
It's like it slants one way, and it's basically says that it's this self-flagellating. We're the only, and the thing that bothers me too is the solution is white saviors coming out and denouncing their value and doing all these things. It's like, I find that also disgusting that you think that you as this white person can then come out and save all these poor, inept people of color. Pisses me off. It's like, that's a grown man over there. Yeah. He can handle himself. Yep. I can handle myself. I don't need to be the savior of another race. It's so arrogant. It bothers me. Anyway, back to history. As told by Wide-Eye. Apparently, Johnson never went back to reckon his score with the Blackfeet. He was pulling out from many favorite haunts now and taking little or no trouble to preserve cabins and rude furnishings which had been his. Wide-Eye, though, heard the rest of the story from old Jim Baker, survivor of the days when Sublet and Hugh Glass roamed the mountains. Now, Hugh Glass was in The Revenant.
Right. Yep.
He's the guy that got attacked by the bear, crawled hundreds and hundreds of miles, blah, blah, blah. So if you saw that Leonardo DiCaprio film.
Crawling in the horse that fell off the cliff.
Which isn't quite accurate, but hey, it's actually well filmed and stuff. But the actual revenge story is different. It's not as romantic as they made it out to be in the movie. Right. Whereas I were with Rapaho Joe and the Bighorns that spring, said old Jim. We went up to the cabin just as the snow was melting and flushed their buzzards off their skeletons. There was 29 Indians. They was laying all of them along the canyon wall as if they was trying to climb it. Could you tell the tribes? Asked Wide-Eye. Well, sure, said old Jim a little testily. They was Blackfoots. I don't know a Blackfoot. I don't know because they were Blackfoots. I don't know. I know a Blackfoot when I see one. That's what he said. Only used very derogatory terms.
So the Blackfeet got their name by the dark soles of their moccasins. The dark soles occurred in part of the ash left from prairie fires.
Makes sense.
There you go.
Very interesting. So that's a dark story. So that's how that story goes down in contrast to what you read in Wikipedia. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle or not at all.
Or not at all. Exactly.
Delgue was tired after their adventure in the Bighorns and told his partner that he wanted to hunt and fish and above all to stay away from Indians. Johnson sympathetically suggested that they repair to the cabin on the Little Snake, which he had taken over so long ago from Old Hatcher. Mm-hmm. So that's the very first cabin that he kind of had when he was a greenhorn.
When Hatcher headed to the coast.
The partners arrived in the fall of 1872 and set to making the place habitable once again. They rebuilt the old corral and gathered some horse feed and plenty of wood for the fire. Then, while Dell determinedly set to his hunting and fishing, Johnson put out a line of traps. He knew his partner, and his traps had not been out for a week before Dell stated his desire to come in on their deal. Even so, the winter was easy for both old mountain men. They trapped till the big snows came without any adventure worthy of mention, then spent the rest of the months till spring, sitting peaceably by their fireside. Lazing those months away, the partners decided they would like to see Mariano Modeno again at his home camp on the Big Thompson. So when snows melted and grasses grew, they prepared again to travel. Dell had some sense that Johnson's preparations were unusually careful, but he was astonished on the clear May morning when they packed to see his partner take everything from the cabin except the rude furniture. He was the more astonished when Johnson packed dry fodder against the walls of the cabin. I'll never need this roost no more, said the crow killer, and touched a match to the fodder. But it was not Johnson's way. It was not the mountain men's way simply to destroy what might be another man's shelter for a season of trapping or a season of need. Only this cabin, where he had once left the Swan, did he destroy. A brisk breeze from the north fanned the flames. They leaped and danced around the walls of Hatcher's ancient roost. So it was a different cabin where they trapped the Blackfeet or tricked them. With their 3 pack horses loaded, the partners mounted their saddle horses and set off, Johnson with the pack reins in one hand. Down the valley they rode, but after a few minutes Johnson left the trail, riding ahead of Dell among the rocks. They halted as they came to a large cairn, square-cornered, its top stones bedded in with dirt to show that they had lain untouched for years. The crow killer spat through his beard. Then, as the sun shone through a cleft in the rocks above them, a beam struck the top of Johnson's sepulchre, squarely in its center, to light up the huge rattlesnake which lay there, fresh from its hibernation. The tail of the reptile whirred now, incessantly. The beady eyes were fastened on the trappers. The long, forked tongue leaped out at them. Dell brought his rifle to his shoulder and lined up his sights perfectly, but Johnson's big hand knocked the rifle aside. "Leave the critter be, Dell," he said.
"No."
With what was perhaps intended for a grin, "It'll make a good watchdog for me."
Every rattlesnake should die.
He turned his horse back onto the trail. Riding behind, Dell knew that he had seen what only 2 men had ever before observed. Johnson himself and the Indian who a full generation ago had spread Johnson's secret. Before they came to the bend in the canyon, he had time to look back just once toward the blazing cabin on the banks of the Little Snake. Delgue was a rough, untutored mountain man, but one not easily impressed. The sense he had now was of a wind sweeping down out of the Wind River Mountains to obliterate a landmark in the history of the West.
Yeah, I'm sure all those mountain men they had to have had multiple cabins, like their trapping routes and all that stuff, And I'd like to be able to hear some of the stories when you come like in the mountains. You come across some of those cabins. I mean, if you knew the history behind them, and which you might be able to find some of them out, but we come across a few here and there. It's pretty cool.
The whole story is crazy. If you've read, I read, what was it? American Serengeti. I also read by Dan Flores. He also wrote American Coyote. Was that what it's called? Or Coyote America?
Coyote America, I think.
Something like that. Where he writes about basically about coyotes, the West, and the ongoing campaign to eliminate the wolf and the coyote from the western United States, and any other predator, from mountain lions to bears as well.
Yes,
they basically had this early mindset of, let's get rid of all the predators, and then we'll just if you're a farmer, you're raising cattle, you're hunting, you're just thinking the fewer mountain lions, wolves, and coyotes I have to share the wild with, the more for me.
Yeah, right.
And there was this sense of there was a government program built to get rid of billions of dollars spent by millions. I don't know what the number was.
It's got to be high.
Insane amounts of money spent on the coordinated and sustained trapping and killing and poisoning
a lot
of wolves and coyotes in the United States. And the idea was the plan from the federal government and that body of the government was to fully eradicate, wipe them off of the planet in this country.
Yeah.
So, not understanding the full weight of that on the ecosystem, habitat, not respecting that animal's right to be on the landscape, and so on. There's a lot of stupid things that human beings have done over the years. But when I read that book, first of all, it was clear that you can't wipe out the coyote.
No.
You can't. The coyote is...
They adapt so well.
They're like what's that monster you cut off its head and it grows like 4 more or something?
Right.
I
can't know.
From
my son would probably know. And I have no idea.
The Hydra?
I don't... Oh.
So what's crazy is coyotes have this deal where they will howl I mean, the book is fascinating. You learn a lot about coyotes. Mm-hmm. I did a little podcast, I think, on it briefly after I read the book. Just a quick summary. I don't remember. I did the Serengeti. I know that. But you sit here and you listen to these coyotes. They howl, and then their hormones are impacted by how close another coyote is that yips back.
Okay.
And they'll have 1 or 2 pups in a litter, or like 8 or 9.
Yeah, right.
Depending on that. Basically, when they call out how many other coyotes are in the area.
The population.
If there's a big population of coyotes, then they will have small pups. They'll also have small litters or no litters. Yeah. When the population is super lean, they'll just replace it with a couple breeding cycles.
And I honestly believe, like, just a little bit of research and stuff, but I honestly believe, the wolves are the same way.
I've seen our friend found litters of pups of like 9 wolves, 10 wolves in a litter, where they say they only have 2 or 3 or something. Yeah, it's right. Like no.
I think it's the same situation as like in an area where they're
scientifically. I know in this book they did determine that coyotes have this. They were trying to figure out how come the coyote actually just got stronger and stronger and stronger. It's like when you cut off the head of the snake and it grows 2 more back. It's like every time you killed, the more coyotes you killed, the more you got. It was the opposite of what you expected.
Yeah.
Where wolves, they were able to pretty much eradicate them.
Right.
The thing with wolves, too, is once you poison a horse and leave it dead, the wolf eats it, and it dies. The other wolves just hang out and won't leave it, so they continue to eat, too, and they all die. And so you kill an entire pack all at once. Coyotes are both solitary and pack. They can choose either way. They can be either way. And some choose one way and some choose another. They're very unique. They're very different. Coyotes they're phenomenal creatures.
I mean, they live just such a wide array of territories and climates, and they're everywhere.
In the book, they talk about strychnine as a poison.
Mm-hmm.
What a horrible, horrible way to die.
Yeah.
Of all the ways to die, that is just dark. And I can only imagine the misery that these people, these Indians, got when they ate those biscuits.
Yeah.
So when your enemy's your enemy, though, like, I got to say, if I'm a Jew in Nazi Germany, I'd be happy to leave some biscuits for those sons of bitches.
Right, exactly.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's the thing, is like, you look at history, and there's some dark freaking times that get sugar-coated, in the teachings of history.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's right.
So, anyway, that's today's episode. Interesting. Yeah. That's the story of the what do you say, 29? They counted 29 piles of bones or whatever of the Blackfoot Indians who came after him in his little boxed-in canyon.
Yeah.
So there's the story. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in next week. We got another one coming your way. And don't forget to support us. Go to Mountain Ops. Use the code Gritty over there. Get some Ignite, some Blaze Shots, some Yeti Mode, some Renew, some of my favorite stuff.
Got some lemonade, sweet tea lemonade.
I got a little bit in here myself. Bugleberry.
The new Bull Rush with Mr. Jacobson is out. Yep. It's actually pretty good.
And if you don't have a Stealthy Hunter rifle cover glassing pad or their CBD gummies, both their sleep gummies and their everyday joint health gummies, check them out. Brad is on him because he's got a little twinge in his knee.
He got a little twinge, and it's
Lampers is like, dude,
sucker away.
You got to get on the CBD train, and it can really help those
inflammation and stuff.
Inflammation.
Yep.
And other products that I highly recommend at Stealthy Nutrition is the Immune Probiotic and the Digest Plus.
Yeah.
Both of those help me get more out of everything I eat and help
the
my
E-Charge.
gut.
I love the E-Charge.
E-Charge, I can't say enough about that. The E-Charge, it's anti-inflammatory as well. Yeah. It's funny because during the pandemic, there were all these ingredients that they said you should be taking if in the event to help you handle COVID a little better. And then post-COVID, a bunch of different sites I was reading, and some, like, the percentages that you needed to take and the concoction, some like 90% of it was in the E-Charge drink the way that it's been concocted. Right. And I was like, hey, Hillary, seems like you, as a doctor, kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah, right.
So it's got some really useful minerals, vitamins, and anti-inflammatory stuff in that E-Charge that is, and it's basically no sugar. Yeah. Shut up,
that rooster
chicken.
It's very clean.
Yeah,
all their proteins and everything are very, very clean, it's nice.
Yeah, it's great.
Good
stuff.
on your gut. Yep. Easy on your gut.
So check all that out. We appreciate you. We thank you, and as always, stay gritty, folks.